I'm jealous of Lazarus. You see, I like to be prepared. So if something matters to me, I prepare for it a lot. For instance, I'll recite the gospel aloud to myself a number of times before proclaiming it here at Mass. It may sound a little ridiculous, but believe me, when I don't practice, I invariably mess it up somehow, tripping over some word or turn of phrase. Just ask the other friars. They can testify. This penchant for preparation means I'm jealous of Lazarus. You see, I want to die well. I want a true and holy death, a good death. But of course, death being what it is, it's not something one can do repeatedly. You can't practice it. I'm jealous because Lazarus gets to have a trial run. Lazarus knows what it's like to die, and eventually he even gets the chance to give it a second try. I imagine it's easier the second time. He might have even looked forward to it. All right, I've done that before. Even though we get only one chance to die well, that doesn't mean it's impossible to practice for it ahead of time. Lent, especially this year, is a season full of small deaths, little deaths to self, little crosses and little Calvaries. And the more we die to ourselves now, to our self-seeking, to our self-assertion, to our idea of how things should go, the more death itself will become a means rather than an end. Because we will find within the dying we have done that Jesus is the resurrection and the life, and that, as he says in the gospel, whoever believes in me, even if he dies, will live. And everyone who lives and believes in me will never die. Whoever believes. The deeper we move into this miracle, the more we see its substance is faith. It is one of the central mysteries of the Christian life that faith is deepened only when it's threatened. Hope is strengthened when we get stretched. The sacrifices, the small deaths to self, as we are learning this Lent, those have an alarmingly wide reach, a universal extension. We are called to die to our own expectations. Sometimes we even have to die to our desire for good and holy things, and the expectations that we can have them on our own terms. I just want to go to Mass. Such is the situation with Martha and Mary as well. I'm not so jealous of them, but I find myself in their position. So they reach out to Jesus in their need. Lazarus is ill, and they have a holy hope and faith in Christ and in Christ's healing power. Shouldn't that faith be rewarded? And yet, what does Jesus do? Nothing. He waits. He's not that far away. If he were far away, then they wouldn't have sent for him. They know he's close. The distance separating our Lord from the house where Lazarus lived was only about a day's journey. And yet he delays for days. He is so close, and yet so absent. It's not unlike you who are so close to St. Pius right now, across the street, across campus the other way, and yet so distant. The pandemic has created this chasm between us. Why does Jesus delay? Why does God not grant the good things that we want? God's delays are mysterious. Suffering is sometimes prolonged for the same reason it's permitted in the first place. That God can bring some greater good out of it. God may refrain for a time from healing, not because he does not love, but because he never stops loving and is preparing a greater good to give. He's preparing us. Heaven's clock runs differently from ours. Human love, impatient, urges that we hurry. Mary and Martha are quick to ask for Jesus' help, and they're not prepared for his slow response. Yet by delaying, he is preparing them that he might impart even more. He is preparing them and all of us for much, much more. Those that Christ wants to draw closest to him, he doesn't work miracles until he puts our faith to the test. In order to give even more than we know how to ask for, in order precisely to fortify and to stretch, to expand our faith. When Lazarus dies, so too does Martha and Mary's hope that Jesus can do what they had expected him to do. They both say, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." If. Their faith in him is conditional. Now conditions have changed. Reality has changed. And so they think his hands are tied. Even their very faith in the resurrection has conditions tied to it. When Jesus assures Martha that Lazarus will rise again, she basically says, I was listening to the first reading today. I know the Lord will open our graves and have them rise. We will rise from them on the last day. How could she know the resurrection and the life was standing before her right then and there? Before Christ manifests that divinity, he exercises his full humanity. He who will call Lazarus out of the tomb first takes the time to cry for him, to cry over his death. God did not become man in order to do away with suffering. He did not come even to explain it. He came to fill it with his presence. With his presence. As Pope Francis so beautifully remarked on Thursday, this is God's strength. Turning to the good everything that happens to us, even the bad things. He brings serenity into our storms, his presence into our emptiness. Because with God, life never dies. As a man, Jesus cries. As God made man, he cries out and brings about something much greater than anyone was prepared to receive. Life from death. Faith is this perpetually defeated thing that always rises again. And if we want to die well, we have to die now. To be prepared to receive graces from God that we can't prepare for on our own. In his time, according to his plan.